Are you ready to learn what it takes to be a successful attorney? You're listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. I'm sitting down with some of the most successful attorneys so you can learn how they made it to the top of the legal industry. You'll hear their advice for how you can forge your unique path to success.
Welcome back to another episode of Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. I am looking forward to this conversation. It's an important one, and it's also a really delicate one. I have to admit that when I talk about this topic in my workshops and speaking engagements and keynotes, it's the one I get most nervous about because it can be misconstrued, and it's something that can be a challenging topic to talk about with nuance. So the theme of today's session is professionalism. I looked up what professionalism means and the Merriam-Webster definition, and I want to read it to you just so we can all get grounded in what I'm talking about here. So professionalism is defined as of, relating to, or characteristic of a profession, being engaged in a profession that requires academic learning as preparation, or characterized by or conforming to the technical or ethical standards of a profession. Sometimes professionalism is defined as having executive presence. I also hear people talk about it in the context of professional presence. The reason professionalism is such a hot topic is because some people interpret it as being the antithesis of showing up authentically. I firmly believe that professionalism and authenticity are not mutually exclusive, but rather they're complementary when they're balanced effectively. Professionalism sets standards for behavior and respectful conduct, and authenticity is bringing one's true self, values, and strengths to work. Note that authenticity is not bringing your whole self to work. I think that the younger generation of talent in today's workforce has been misled by this idea of bring your whole self to work. Bring the parts of yourself that are appropriate for a workplace dynamic. This is especially true when you are in professional services and you're representing the best interests of your clients. What we're getting at when we talk about professionalism is this difference between someone's intent and how they are perceived by others. In professional services, how we are perceived is critically important. It can make the difference in winning a case or losing a case. There can be hundreds of millions of dollars on the line. So we need to understand that sometimes we could be well-intentioned, but perceived negatively, and use that insight to inform how we want to show up and behave. It's not that we can't do something. It's that we could do something, and we understand the risk of doing so. When we show up as the professional version of our authentic selves, and I think that is the goal, not you show up in just a professional way that conforms to exactly what a workplace might demand of you based on your perception of it, and it's not bringing your whole authentic self to work. We show up with this professional version of our authentic self. We are showing up in a way that we believe in. We're not compromising our ethics, our values. We're not doing something that we think is harmful to ourselves or others. We're taking into consideration what is appropriate for this moment. I want to acknowledge that oftentimes there's a lot of bias that's brought into this idea of professionalism. And I recently led a workshop at a law firm where we were talking about this concept. And someone said, I don't believe in professionalism as a social construct. Everyone is welcome to their own beliefs. That is encouraged. It makes for richer conversation, diverse perspectives. I want to acknowledge that the term professionalism often carries with it a lot of bias. It's often used as this catch-all term. I don't think that's to say we can't use it and talk about it as an important concept in our workplace, but we do need to be aware of it being used as a way to be harmful to certain backgrounds, cultures, ethnicities, and just have that discretion of what does it mean and what can I stand behind. So when I am asked to give a speech at a law firm or a corporation, I'm meeting with the firm's leadership to understand, why are you bringing me in? Usually there's friction. There's a pain point that they want to resolve. And the goal is for me as an outside speaker to come in and provide actionable advice that will move the needle. And that's always my goal. All the time, I'm getting asked to speak about professionalism. And when I probe, why are we talking about this? Give me some examples. I hear that leaders are feeling that today's early career talent are sometimes showing up in a way that they don't think is professional. So again, we're getting into their perception. And my guess is everyone is operating in a way that they feel is appropriate. They have the best of intentions, but they might not be fully understanding how they're perceived by others. And people's perceptions are their reality. When you're in a hierarchy of any organization, there are people in power who are more senior, and your career can be dependent on how they perceive you. That's the reality of the working world. So again, my goal is not to say what someone must do or stop doing. It's to help people make informed decisions about how you choose to show up, knowing how others could perceive you or how they're likely to perceive you. And each person gets to make their own judgment call on what's important to them, what they're willing to do differently, and what they're not willing to compromise on. So when I ask leaders, just give me some examples of what people are doing that you deem unprofessional. There are some very consistent responses. Complaining about a colleague, gossiping about a colleague. So talking to your work friend about your manager who you both hate, it always gets back to the person you are gossiping about. Sharing a little bit too much about your personal life. Your colleagues are not your best friends. And if they are, that's a very unique situation. And the assumption should not be that you reveal everything. So someone talking about the crazy weekend you had in Vegas, and I did this, and I was out till 4 a.m. Not professional. That's not what is appropriate for the workplace. We're here to do a job, to represent our clients and stay focused on the work, while also having some level of personal relationship. But I think even if you are very close with your colleagues, there are certain things that should not be shared in the workplace. Have that conversation when you're out to dinner with them on a Saturday night. Showing up late to meetings, often talked about as being unprofessional. It shows a disrespect for other people's time. It's, I think, a way of signaling that you are not organized, you're not reliable. And for anyone in professional services, being organized and reliable is paramount when you are representing someone's best interests, your clients. I will now share some of the things that I've seen within the last few months. This is just in the last few months that I will say, I don't think is professional. This is my perception. These are my opinions. So number one, this is so ironic, but I was actually giving a presentation to first-year attorneys at a big fancy firm. We were talking about professionalism and executive presence, and one of the attorneys had on their desk their chewing tobacco. They were in the front row, had their chewing tobacco on the desk, and were spitting in a water bottle during this conversation on professionalism. I felt like it was an out-of-body experience. Like, am I imagining this? I found that was unprofessional. And also, doesn't that violate like the code of buildings? Are we allowed to have tobacco in buildings these days? I don't know. But it was very distracting for me as a speaker. And it's something where I thought, gosh, would they do that in front of a partner, in front of a client? Is that what a client would want representing them? all the time. I hear people casually using swear words, cuss words in a workplace environment. For some people, that can be deeply offensive or grating. So I think it's best to avoid them. I had an attorney actually in one of my programs who was wearing a dress so short, I kid you not, I could see her underwear. Not that I want to see her underwear, but it's so distracting. You're just looking at it like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening right now. I was at a corporate event and there was someone who had clearly had way too much to drink. They were talking really loudly, slurring their words. Unprofessional. This is something that is very controversial, and I know about 50% of you will disagree with me on this. I do not think your pets should be crawling on you in a video call. I was on a call with someone, and her cat is literally crawling all over her body while we were talking. It wasn't like some super important call, but it was so distracting. I'm looking at your cat, like, aren't we supposed to be talking about work here? Why am I hearing the meowing? I don't think it's such a big deal to have your dog, sleeping in the background on a video call, but your focus should be on the work when you are at work, when you are talking with your colleagues. I think it's a signal of your engagement in the conversation, that you take it seriously. And the question that leaders and clients will always have is this behavior that you think is appropriate in a high stakes environment? If you're doing it here, how do I know that you're not going to do it when we are in a pitch meeting with a prospective client, when we're in front of a judge, when you're taking a deposition? Is your cat going to be corralled during a deposition? I sure hope so. But since it's crawling all the time, I really don't know that. So think about how you're showing up internally in seemingly low stakes environments and asking yourself, if someone saw me doing this, would they be worried if I did this in a higher stakes meeting? Another just kind of pet peeve for me is seeing someone's bed in the background of a video call, especially if your bed is unmade. I want to fly to wherever you live and make your bed for you, okay? I know the argument that some people live in really small, say a studio apartment in New York, and you can't not have your bed in the background. Then blur your background. You don't need to show everything that's behind you, or just angle your computer so you're posted up in front of a white wall, something that's not distracting. I just think there's something weird about your colleagues and clients seeing where you sleep. So all of the examples I just gave, they make you memorable for the wrong reasons. So these people that I'm thinking about, it's been months. I've spoken to probably 10,000 people since some of those situations of the really short dress, the cuss words, the tobacco, since those have happened, and yet I remember them. I remember those 5 people out of thousands because they made an impression and they are not who I would want on my team. So I think about it as I really don't want to be associated with those behaviors, so I wouldn't want someone representing me to exhibit those behaviors. So why does all of this matter? In professional services, and that's really the context I'm focused on here, you are hired by a client to represent them. Your goal is to avoid any behavior that would detract from the arguments you're making or the work product you produce. You might not agree with someone's perception of professionalism, but your livelihood depends on people wanting to hire you and your firm. So I think we all need to make effort to understand the expectations of our clients, of the partners we work for, and take that into consideration, if nothing else. I know that there are plenty of leaders who don't feel comfortable having certain people on their team in front of clients because they do not trust them to represent the firm. Some people might say, fine, then I feel so strongly that I need to be spitting out my chewing tobacco that if you don't want to promote me, if you don't want to invite me to high stakes meetings, that's your problem. There's nothing wrong with that. It's all about knowing the potential impact of your decision to continue doing something. I'll wrap this up by encouraging you to almost do a little self-audit. Is there anything I could be doing that could be perceived as being unprofessional? I think of it almost as, think about how you showed up your first week on the job. You've probably gotten more lax, more comfortable, which is good in many ways, but is there anything you need to kind of course correct on? Is there some elements of how you showed up in that first week on the job that you could probably benefit from going back to? You took the work really seriously. You wanted to make a strong impression. You were building your reputation. I think that self-audit is important. It's paying attention to what other people, those who are respected, those who have influence, those who have power, what are they saying? What are they doing? And importantly, what are they not saying and not doing? That will give you some insight into what's kind of the norms and what's accepted in the environment that I'm currently in. You're also constantly considering what are your values and ethics. Take that seriously. Those should never be compromised. I also think that there's this element of considering how strongly you feel about something and really getting clear on, is it worth risking my reputation or my career to stand behind something? So do a little self-audit. Pay a little bit more attention to how other people in your workplace are showing up, what they're saying, what they're doing. See if there are any micro actions you might take to either turn up the dial on something, turn back the dial on something, so that you can position yourself for the career opportunities you're excited for, while also staying true to what is most important to you. I'd love your input on this topic. It is something that I don't take lightly. I understand that there is bias woven into this idea of professional presence. And I'm always open to hearing your perspective, your views on it, how you think even this idea of professionalism might change over time as Gen Z starts getting into more leadership positions within organizations. So leave a comment wherever you watch this podcast with your take, and I look forward to hearing from you. All right, take care until next time.
Thanks for listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn for weekly tips on how to accelerate your career. If you're loving this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd click follow on your favorite listening platform. While you're there, give us a 5-star rating. If you're interested in having me speak at your organization, or if you have topics you'd like us to cover on the podcast, send me a note at info@eleviewconsulting.com. That's info@ELEVIEW consulting.com. All opinions expressed by Elise and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Eleview Consulting or any law firm. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as legal advice or the basis for legal decisions.